Ladies and gentlemen, this is Internet Personality Vangelus here with a very belated review of the Knight Morpher Commander by Mastermind Creations. Let me say this to start. This review is being shot after the Knight Morpher Annihilator review. So a lot of the problems I'm going to be pointing out in terms of the structure of this toy have been solved by the company. I'm mostly pointing them out because some folks might still be buying this colored version. And at the time of this recording, there is no re-release, but I'm still going to call this video the first release version, because hopefully, ideally, Mastermind Creations will at some point release this guy with all the fixes implemented by the Annihilator. This train mode, I have been told, is actually realistically colored. There were trains that looked like this. However, it still has some neat little throwbacky details. I mean, it is a red and blue train, but the trailer, quote-unquote trailer, is gray with that very particular shape of stripe in the form of the silver bar running along the outside, or pipe. It's coated in sculpted rivets, and I love it. The paint and sculpt is generally solid on this thing. There's no crazy worky locomotive wheel bits, but all the wheels do roll. Also, the trailer can open up to reveal a Mortar Cannon within. This thing is pretty huge, and if this did show up on a railroad, I would be terrified. The Mortar Cannon can actually slide forward and back a little bit along a track here, and it's a cool idea. It's like a neat throwback to that classic gun emplacement that Prime usually carried around in his large box, and this time, the disguise of said box is a little bit more effective. There's also a quote-unquote trailer hitch down here which can extend out in either direction. Unfortunately, the only thing you can really do with this right now is hook this to more of these. So if you own a whole bunch of these, you can have them hooked back to back. I guess if you own two of these, you can have them hooked back to back. Yay! But it's time to drop all of our disguises. Let's transform the commander. After separating the trailer component and transforming the chimney into the commander's rifle, the rest of the conversion process is quite simple and thoughtfully designed. Sadly, this hits a bit of a wall when the commander's plastic tolerances make basic steps such as sliding the legs out into a scary task. Easy procedures with disagreeing materials is the crux of nearly any problem one will have with transforming this figure. That aside, clever moments such as the spreading cowcatcher have me really enjoying the Knight Morpher Commander's engineering, even if the implementation isn't 100%. Aesthetically, the sliding and unfolding mechanisms of the arms make for a decently proportioned robot. Once again, it is only the wonky plastic tolerance issue that will really take you out of it. Really, on the base level, the Knight Morpher Commander's transformation is very clean, with a lot of tight engineering, no overcomplication, and a good bipedal robot result. But about those plastic tolerances. When you're transforming him and you're sliding this arm piece forward, it's actually supposed to click into place here. The problem is that the tabs that click it into place on the commander are made of a fairly weak translucent blue plastic, and on mine and several others, ours don't click anymore because the little pieces that clicked it are, not quite with us anymore. Aside from that, he's actually got quite a striking robot mode. It's very Optimus Prime, it's very Hearts of Steel, lots of rivets again. There's a real knight aesthetic going on, with lots of plated armor and things like that. And overall, the actual silhouette is pretty cool. The upper arms look a little bit thin at first, but once you have it in hand, they're not quite as stick-like as one may think from pictures. And the silver paint used by Mastermind is a really pretty one. So the sculpt and paint are quite solid. The part that becomes less solid is some of those construction things. However, before I continue, I should point out that if you've seen my Knight Morpher Annihilator video, you'll know that this guy's noggin is actually the one from the Annihilator. The original one is in this bag with his leprosy little blue clips. The main difference is that the original one could only move left and right. This one is on a ball joint and can go all over the place. So if you're buying this thing on its own, you will only have swivel motion for the neck. Also, this little visor thing on the original one can't actually go in there out of the factory. You'll get this as a separate piece, and some will actually say that he looks better without it in place. But the divots on the sides of his temples will need to be drilled in by yourself with a small tool like an awl, if you're using the stock Knight Morpher Commander. And I'm going to leave his visor off for the rest of the video, because the Annihilator already showed you what it looks like. Outside of the neck, his posability is quite nice. It's very ratchety, and again, this guy's version of that posability can get a little bit over ratchety. That's really scary to do. On the Annihilator, this was fixed. I'll keep saying that, I'm quite sure. But on this guy, some of the ratchets can be terrifying. The feedback thread on TFW 2005 actually has several fixes for some of his joint problems that users of the toy have come up with. So check that out if you really want to get in there with a screwdriver and fix things yourself. He's got full arm posability, to a basic degree anyway. He technically has a double joint here, but on this arm, the second joint also moves really solidly, so I try not to use it too often. His wrists can't really swivel in here, mostly due to the curvature of this thing, but he does have a waist joint, and it's actually a ratcheting one. The matrix is also removable if you so choose, but it's kind of flat, and I don't know of anybody who could really hold it with two hands in the classic style. Moving down to his legs, there's one more major problem with this guy that was completely fixed on the Annihilator, which is that these wheel things just kind of dangle. They are really loose. This side's not quite as loose, but it's enough where often you'll be messing with him and all of a sudden this one's sticking up there and you don't even know what happened. Outside of that, he has got ratchets on his legs. They're also a little bit solid, not overly solid though. The knees are where it gets a little bit scary, and if you saw in the transformation, the slider is horrifyingly tight on my copy of the toy. Again, all things fixed on the Annihilator. He does have some cool ankle rockers, so you can get him to have a solid flat-footed stance. His ankle posability is a little bit limited unless you fold up this thing, then it opens up a little bit more, but then you also have this giant thing sticking off the back, which, I see what they're doing with having them kind of hang off like this, so it looks a little bit more like it's, you know, plated armor, but I do wish this had some slightly more solid way of clipping in. This hasn't happened on mine, clearly, but I have heard of people having some bad luck snapping these off, so you do want to be careful with these ones. On the Annihilator and on this one, I've actually not had any problems with them, but it has been very case by case, much like the broken inner arm clips. And if you want to give him a gun, you can give him his smokestack, technically. I do like that the smokestacks are replicated on his shoulders there. And the gun very much replicates the shape of the classic Optimus Prime rifle. So overall, I'd like this guy as the standard package that he is, using only the front part of the train. But there was more train. As you saw before, you can crack this thing open a la the classic trailer, and you've got yourself a Mortar Cannon. Also, you've got yourself a piece that fell off the front. We'll deal with this later. So while the Mortar Cannon can, you know, rotate around, slide back and forth, mount the commander's rifle on top, and then be a double mortar, or I guess a mortar with a giant gun sight that's just a gun, it is a fairly simple ordeal. I mean, you can try to put the commander here, and now he's standing in his trailer. Hooray! Now, the main crux of this thing is that you can break up this mortar cannon into a whole bunch of stuff. It sections apart like this, revealing a somewhat scary piece we'll talk about in a second. You can then break this bit in half, and you can even pull the cap off this. And now you got a stubby mortar cannon. We're all winners here. These two components combine to form a lance, and this part is scary because you see this thin thing sticking out the top here? When you reassemble the mortar cannon, this can come under some stress. It hasn't snapped on mine, but it's terrifying, and this was rectified in the Annihilator. However, you just pull it out and then plug on the tip of the mortar cannon proper. You got a lance. And what goes better with a lance than a shield? The piece that mysteriously fell off the front of the trailer can fold open, and you got yourself a holy man shield for the Crusades. The fist hole readily accommodates the handle of the lance, and one of the sockets on the side of Commander's forearms can easily accommodate the shield. But the rest of the mortar cannon's barrel can form a jetpack. I know, crazy, right? Using these insanely cut holes for these insanely curved yet pointy peg-like ridges, you fold up the flap of his back, and then, using a little bit of Tetris-like ingenuity, get the barrels in place. And now you got the fully melee-armed, rocket-boosted Knight Morpher Commander! Oh hey, but it's not crazy enough! He still needs his gun! Let's stick it on his arm! Now you got the Knight Morpher Commander with rockets, melee weapon shields, and a gun on his arm! And it's a nice accessory set. It's a cool throwback to when his cousin borrowed Sideswipe's Rocket Pack back in that one cartoon back in those 80s decades times whenever. And having a giant lance and a shield is pretty knightly. If that wrist angle was not to your liking, do not fret. There are spare hands stored under the trailer. And about the hands themselves, you see how they have this gap in the middle kind of to form a friction joint? It didn't work. As you can see, they warp really easily. In fact, this one was warped right out of the package. On the Annihilator, this was entirely fixed. How? They just changed it to a solid peg and it worked. So, unfortunate. Also, thanks to those teeth, pulling the original hand off can be a bit of a pain in the buttocks. And you'll want to make sure that the handle of the lance is not slid all the way into the bent wrist. You'll want to have it high up so that it doesn't catch on the red armor cuff of the quote-unquote sleeve. Once it's in place, he certainly is tilting his wrist slightly. It's actually never been something I've been all that big a fan of. The angle by which he tilts the lance, or whatever it is you do put in that hand, is so minorly different that it can't really accommodate a lot of amazingly new poses. I always felt that if they were going to have the wrist tilted forward, it should be tilted forward a lot more than that. But hey, options are options. And you do get two of those hands, so you can have him dual-wield slightly tilted forward lances if you have a pair of these guys. Oh, and would now be a good time to mention that this guy has absolutely thulicious light piping in his eyes, and it's blue. Mastermind Creations proved with this guy that they know how to make light shine through clear plastic. If you've seen the Annihilator video, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is definitely a huge plus. The angry Optimus Prime face sculpt with the glowing eyes really takes it far for me. Some people have said this looks too villainous, but I love it. Taking on a fully scratch-built Hearts of Steel design was a very bold move by Mastermind Creations as their first foray into the field. However, if you're in the market for a Knight Morpher in this color scheme, and you see the first release of it, I really would skip it. It's wrought with construction problems that were all fixed in a later release called the Annihilator. And hopefully Mastermind Creations will go back and redo the Commander with all those improvements. It is a great design, the sculpt is really crisp, the paint is really vibrant. The engineering is actually quite well done, and the accessories are pretty imaginative. All the concepts are dead solid. It's the execution that really screws this thing up. And it speaks volumes for Mastermind Creations as a company that they actually did go in and fix all those problems. Should you buy the Knight Morpher Commander? If it gets re-released to the same degree of quality as the Knight Morpher Annihilator, then yes. But I would avoid the original shipment. Should you be wary of Mastermind Creations in future? Well, I don't really know, they've only released 2 toys, but honestly, I wouldn't be. They've proven that they do know what they're doing when they redid this guy as the Annihilator. And I'm looking forward to the Cyclops and the attack train. If you do have a steampunk Transformer itch that needs to be scratched, look into their stuff, and look into a possible upgraded re-release of this guy. This has been Chief Engineer Internet Personality Vangelus, stoking the coals of his toy-reviewing locomotive. I'll catch y'all later. Unless you're tied to the tracks, in which case you'll probably burst like a thin bag filled with squishy crimson goodness. I learned that from Red Dead Redemption. Woo woo. Chugga 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 chugga.